Most dangerous inmates in San Quentin, The Untold Files. San Quentin State Prison, a place older than most American cities, a place where some of the most dangerous men in California's history have lived, fought, and survived. Perched on the edge of the San Francisco Bay, San Quentin looks calm from the outside, sunlight hitting its walls, boats passing quietly nearby. But inside, every hallway holds a story. Every cell has secrets, and some inmates are known by guards simply as the ones you never turn your back on. Today, we open the untold files. These are the inmates who shaped San Quentin's darkest reputation. Through power, influence, fear, and survival. Everything you're about to hear is crafted to be educational, respectful, and safe, while giving you the clearest look possible at life inside one of America's most historic prisons. Let's step inside. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The man they called the Shadow. The first file opens with a name the public rarely hears. An inmate known only by a nickname. The Shadow. Why that name? Because no one ever heard him coming. He moved quietly. He talked quietly. He watched everything. Guards said he memorized routines, shift changes, food schedules, even which keys jangled on which officer's belt. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the loudest. But he was the one inmate everyone kept a distance from. Inside San Quentin's Old North Block, inmates whispered that the Shadow had a way of knowing things before they happened. Like who was being transferred, and who was about to get into trouble. One officer described him as a storm cloud that never made noise, but you knew it could strike. In reality, he was extremely observant, a survivor who learned that information is the strongest form of power. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. The Shadow represents a type of inmate San Quentin knows well. Quiet, controlled, patient, and far more dangerous than the loud ones. The Cage Fighter of East Block. Our second file introduces someone totally different. But explosive. Unpredictable. An inmate who gained a reputation long before San Quentin. A former underground fighter known inside the prison system as Iron Jaw. He earned the name because he once took a blow that would have knocked most people out cold. But not him. Inside East Block, the part of the prison closest to death row, Iron Jaw became known for his strength and his fast temper. Officers rotated shifts just to avoid dealing with him too often. Not because he was unstoppable, but because he had a way of turning a quiet hallway into a dangerous situation in seconds. What made him especially unpredictable? He lived by a simple rule. Never be the first to start something, but never, ever be the last to finish it. Even other inmates kept a respectful distance. Not because they feared him, but because he fought with a kind of desperate intensity that came from years of survival. In a prison where respect can be the difference between safety and danger, Iron Jaw became a symbol of raw force. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous inmates aren't the silent ones, but the ones who carry storms inside their fists. The strategist in the Tier 2 cell. Not all danger comes from fists or strength. Some inmates have something far more powerful. A mind that doesn't stop calculating. This file belongs to an inmate called the Strategist. No tattoos. No loud personality. No violent outbursts. But every guard who worked near him said the same thing. He thinks too fast. Too sharp. Too much. The Strategist was the type of inmate who read everything. Law books, newspapers, psychology, even old prison rulebooks. Not because he wanted to escape, but because knowledge made him powerful. He helped inmates write legal motions. He explained prison regulations better than new officers could. And he understood human behavior in a way that made people uncomfortable. One guard shared a moment that became famous inside the unit. Before a fight broke out on the tier, the strategist calmly closed his book, looked at the officer, and said, "You may want to step back now." 10 seconds later, the chaos started. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fear. It was awareness. He watched people's patterns, their emotions, their tone of voice. And because of that, he could predict moments long before they exploded. In a place like San Quentin, that kind of intelligence is its own kind of danger. The old lion of San Quentin Yard. Not all dangerous inmates are young. Some are legends. This file opens with a man known as the Old Lion. He had spent more time at San Quentin than many officers had spent on Earth. Decades behind the walls. Decades learning how the prison moved, breathed, and changed. Older inmates treated him like a living history book. Younger inmates treated him like a myth. Officers treated him with professional respect, because they knew he understood the prison better than anyone working there. The Old Lion wasn't physically strong anymore. But influence? That he had. He could calm a conflict on the yard with a single sentence. He could create tension with a single look. People followed his lead because he had survived every era of San Quentin, from the 1970s steel bars to the modern lockdown systems. He never bragged. He never raised his voice. But everyone understood one thing. When the Old Lion spoke, you listened, because he carried the memories of 1,000 stories and the weight of everything this prison had ever seen. The one who never slept. San Quentin officers keep notes, incident logs, behavior reports, daily observations. And inside those records, there was one inmate whose notes always said the same thing. Awake during every check. Every hour. Every night. Every week. Inmates called him Night Watch. No one knew if it was paranoia, trauma, or survival instinct. But he never slept deeply, and sometimes he didn't sleep at all. Guards said his eyes followed every sound, every footstep, every set of keys turning down the tier. He memorized the night rhythm of San Quentin, the hum of the generators, the clatter of food carts in the early morning, the long echo of a gate rolling open 2 units away. Most inmates feared the nighttime because it felt endless. Night Watch studied it like a map. Some officers believed he stayed awake because he didn't trust anyone. Others believed he stayed awake because he had seen too much in his past facilities. A few believed he stayed awake because danger finds the people who close their eyes first. Whatever the truth was, one thing became clear. Night Watch wasn't dangerous because he fought, or because he yelled, or because he carried power. He was dangerous because he noticed everything. Things no one else ever saw. Things that kept the prison on edge. Things that made people say, if something happens here tonight, he'll be the first to know. The newcomer who rose too fast. Every prison has a newcomer who enters quietly and somehow climbs the internal ladder faster than anyone expects. San Quentin's file on this inmate was labeled Rapid Influence, Monitor Closely. He went by a simple nickname, Ace. Ace wasn't loud. He wasn't violent. He wasn't dramatic. But he had a talent. He made friends quickly, and alliances even quicker. Within days, he knew who controlled what, who managed the card tables, who managed the phones, who handled cleaning crews, who ran the workout yard. And somehow, without pushing, without threatening, without starting trouble, he became someone people listened to. The danger wasn't in what Ace did. It was in how fast he adapted. San Quentin officers saw it before inmates did. A newcomer who gains that much influence, that quickly, can shift the balance inside any unit. And in a place where balance keeps peace, shifts are dangerous. One officer said, "We weren't watching him because he caused problems. We were watching him because he could change the whole room just by walking in." Ace became a reminder that not all dangerous inmates are loud. Some are simply gifted at playing the social game better than anyone else. The quiet giant of H Unit. San Quentin H Unit sits slightly apart from the main structures. Different sound, different rhythm, different energy. And inside that unit was one inmate guards labeled simply as extremely strong, use caution. Everyone else knew him as the quiet giant. He was huge. Broad shoulders, tall frame, arms like tree trunks. But that wasn't the part that made officers cautious. It was that he never raised his voice. Ever. Not even when inmates argued near him. Not even when officers gave instructions. He didn't talk much. He rarely got angry. But when he did, the room froze. Not because he caused mayhem, but because everyone knew he could if he wanted to. In a prison environment, people fear the unpredictable, but they respect the controlled. And the quiet giant was the definition of control. He spent most of his time reading or working out. He followed rules. He stayed away from problems. But when someone disrespected him, even by accident, his silence was louder than any threat. One officer put it perfectly. He's not dangerous because of what he does. He's dangerous because of what he chooses not to do. That's the kind of presence that shapes a whole housing unit. The one who could wait forever. Some inmates break rules out of impulse. Others do it out of anger. But one inmate became known for something far more unsettling. Patience. His file nickname was Slow Burn. He never reacted immediately to anything. Not insults. Not pressure. Not surprises. He observed. He studied. He waited. Guards joked that he moved like time didn't matter. Inmates joked that he never acted until he had a reason no one else could see. But the truth behind Slow Burn was simple. He learned long ago that rushing in prison leads to trouble. He planned everything, from when he chose to walk to chow, to when he chose to speak to someone on the yard. He understood the prison ecosystem with a patience that made officers uneasy. One time, an inmate tried to provoke him, shouting, pushing, making loud threats. Slow Burn didn't react. He simply walked away. The next day, the other inmate was transferred for unrelated reasons. But everyone remembered Slow Burn's calm face, and the way he knew the situation would change without lifting a finger. His danger wasn't violence. His danger was strategy. He represented a quiet lesson about prison life. In San Quentin, timing is everything. And the inmate who can wait the longest usually wins. The inmate who could talk his way out of anything. Not every dangerous inmate fights with strength. Some fight with words. This next file covers an inmate San Quentin officers quietly called the Mouthpiece. Not because he was loud, but because he had a skill that made him uniquely powerful. He could talk. Talk in a way that calmed people down. Talk in a way that stirred people up. Talk in a way that made guards second-guess their own decisions. He wasn't manipulative in a harmful way, but he was persuasive, smooth, fast-thinking. He knew how to read faces, how to tell when someone was stressed, how to shift the mood of a room with just a few sentences. New inmates followed him. Older inmates respected him. Officers approached him when they needed to settle a dispute without force. One officer said, if he had used that gift on the outside, he could have been a lawyer or a politician. But inside San Quentin, his words carried weight. He could prevent problems. He could start problems. He could flip a situation simply by changing the tone of a conversation. That kind of influence can be dangerous in a place where emotions run high. The Mouthpiece didn't rely on strength or intimidation, only speech. But in a prison where communication controls everything from safety to routine, that made him one of the most influential inmates on the yard. The one who knew every corner of the yard. Some inmates stay in their cells. Some stick to their group. But one inmate became legendary because he walked everywhere. Slowly, silently, with his hands behind his back. Watching. His nickname in the files was simple. The Walker. Every day, same time, same routine. He walked laps around the yard, around the edges of the basketball court, past the weight pit, past the benches where older inmates sat. He never stopped. He never rushed. He simply observed. To most people it looked harmless. A man getting exercise. But the officers noticed something deeper. He was watching patterns. Who stood where? Who talked to who? Who avoided who? Which groups formed circles? Which areas stayed tense? He knew the prison like a map. Every corner. Every blind spot. Every spot where officers had slower visibility. He wasn't planning anything. He wasn't plotting escape. He just understood San Quentin better than anyone else walking that yard. One seasoned guard said, he didn't need a weapon. His weapon was how well he understood the environment. The walker represents a type of inmate rarely talked about. Someone who becomes dangerous because they see the entire picture, not just their cell. The one who kept everyone guessing. Of all the inmates in these untold files, this one might be the most unpredictable. He didn't have a pattern. He didn't have a routine. He didn't have allies. Everyone, guards and inmates, said the same thing. You never know what mood he'll wake up in. His file label was volatile, zero predictability. Inmates called him Switch. Switch could go from calm to upset in seconds. Not violently, just emotionally. One day he'd spend hours drawing. The next day he'd refuse to leave his cell. The day after that, he'd be pacing like he was trying to walk through the floor. Officers weren't afraid of him. They were cautious around him. Because unpredictable people make situations tense even when nothing is happening. One guard described him like this. He wasn't the scariest inmate. He was just the one who could make the room feel uneasy. Sometimes, Switch would act extremely friendly. Other times, he'd stare at the wall for an hour like he was trapped in his thoughts. His unpredictability made other inmates avoid confrontations with him. Not because he was powerful, but because they didn't understand what he would do next. In a prison environment, certainty is safety. Uncertainty is danger. And Switch lived in uncertainty every single day. The man who knew every rule better than anyone else. San Quentin is full of rules. Rules about movement. Rules about counts. Rules about work crews. Rules about mail. Rules about everything. But one inmate followed them more strictly than anyone else. So strictly that officers gave him the file nickname, the Rulebook. He could quote guidelines from memory. He corrected new officers when they misread a policy. He reminded inmates what they could and couldn't do. He wasn't trying to be difficult. He just believed rules were the only thing that kept the place predictable. But the problem? Sometimes knowing too much makes you dangerous. Because when an inmate knows every detail of the rules, they also know every loophole, every blind spot, every time window, when officers rotate or change positions. He never used that knowledge for anything harmful. But officers kept notes like, extremely intelligent, extremely aware, monitor closely. He became a strange combination of helpful and threatening. Helpful because he kept people informed, threatening because he understood the system as well as the administration. In San Quentin, knowledge is currency. And the Rulebook had more knowledge than anyone. The one trusted by no one, and feared by everyone. This final chapter in today's segment focuses on an inmate unlike the others. He had no friends, no alliances, no group, no one to sit with in the chow hall. Every unit has someone like him, isolated, quiet, disconnected. But what made him truly dangerous was one simple truth. No one knew what he was thinking. His file nickname was Ghost. Ghost rarely spoke. He rarely reacted. He rarely showed emotion. But when something happened on the tier, an argument, a loud noise, a sudden surprise, he didn't jump like everyone else. He stayed still, watching, calculating. That calmness made other inmates nervous. Because in a place built on emotions and reactions, Ghost was unreadable. The less people understood him, the more they avoided him. One officer wrote, "He isn't the most violent. He isn't the strongest. He isn't the loudest. But he is the one no inmate wants to annoy." Ghost represented the unknown. And in prison, the unknown might be the most dangerous thing of all. The inmate who controlled silence. In San Quentin, noise rules the day. Shouting from tiers. Heavy boots on metal stairs. Doors clanging like thunder. Echoes bouncing off concrete walls. Noise is normal. But one inmate flipped that rule upside down. Guards called him mute. Not because he physically couldn't speak, but because he simply didn't. No greetings. No arguments. No casual conversations. Nothing. He moved through the prison like a shadow that refused to make sound. Even the way he walked was quiet, smooth steps, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm. But his silence wasn't peaceful. It was intimidating. When Mute entered a room, people stopped talking without even realizing why. His presence swallowed sound. His stillness made others uneasy. It felt like he was always listening, not for secrets, but for weaknesses. Officers wrote notes like, highly observant, rare emotional response, maintain awareness. Inmates said he had a quiet pressure, the kind of presence that changed the mood with no action at all. Mute wasn't violent. He wasn't aggressive. He simply was. And somehow, that made him one of the most unsettling men in the entire prison. Because in a world where everyone yells to be heard, silence becomes a weapon. The one every officer remembered by name. Some inmates disappear into the system. They blend in. Their names vanish into paperwork. But a few? Officers never forget them. This inmate was one of those few. His file label was highlighted in yellow. Memorable, high awareness required. Inmates called him Redline. Redline wasn't dangerous because of strength, influence, or intelligence. He was dangerous because he had a legendary memory. He remembered everything. Every officer's face. Every inmate's habits. Every conversation on the yard. Every schedule from every unit he'd ever lived in. Once, a lieutenant mentioned being late for count rotation. Something most inmates wouldn't notice. Redline replied calmly, "No, sir, you were late last Thursday too." The lieutenant froze. Because he was right. Patterns most people ignored. Redline stored in his mind like a library. And in a place where the smallest detail can change everything, a memory like that makes someone extremely unpredictable. Not violent. Not aggressive. Just aware. Too aware. Officers weren't afraid of him, but they respected the fact that he never forgot a single thing. And in prison, a perfect memory is a kind of power all on its own. The one who never showed pain. Pain affects everyone. Fear, stress, sadness, disappointment. But one inmate in San Quentin seemed immune to all of it. His nickname? Stoneface. No reactions. No flinches. No changes in expression. If someone insulted him, Stoneface blinked once and stayed calm. If something chaotic happened 2 cells down, Stoneface didn't move. If guards ordered a sudden lockdown, and everyone rushed to secure positions, Stoneface sat down slowly, as if nothing unusual was happening at all. Some inmates said he trained himself to block out feelings. Others said he simply didn't care anymore. Officers didn't know what to think. But the part that made him suspiciously dangerous was this. Nobody could tell when he was stressed, angry, or afraid. He was unreadable, completely. And when you can't read a person's emotions, you can't predict their actions. One officer said, "He's not the scariest man here. He's just the hardest to understand." Stoneface lived in a quiet emotional world of his own. And in a place built on reactions. Someone who doesn't react makes everyone around them uneasy. The one who protected others too much. Danger doesn't always come from aggression. Sometimes it comes from loyalty. This file centers on an inmate known as Guardian. Guardian wasn't feared, he was respected. But he was still considered dangerous because he had one rule. Protect the people he cared about, no matter the cost. He wasn't part of a gang. He wasn't part of a group. He didn't have a position. But if someone he liked was threatened, even by accident, he stepped in. Not violently. Not angrily. Just firmly. Officers wrote things like, intervenes quickly when others are at risk. Acts as a shield. High loyalty. Inmates, especially younger ones, often gravitated toward him, not because he was powerful, but because he made them feel safer. But there was a downside. When someone protects too strongly, situations can escalate. Guardian wasn't a problem maker. He was a problem solver. But in a prison environment, becoming the protector can turn small issues into major ones. Guardian represented a very real and very complex type of inmate. Not dangerous because of harm, but dangerous because of involvement. When you step into conflict to defend others, you become part of every conflict. And in San Quentin, that can change the entire dynamic of a unit. The one who was calm, until he wasn't. Every officer knows this type. They look peaceful, respectful, cooperative. The kind of inmate who says, "Yes, sir," keeps their space clean, and rarely gets into trouble. San Quentin's nickname for this man was Calm Break. He was polite. He followed instructions. He was easy to talk to. But every few months, something invisible inside him snapped. Not violently, just emotionally. He would become tense. His hands would shake. He would pace in slow circles. His voice would change. Officers learned to spot it early. He didn't hide it. He didn't try to resist. But the shift in his behavior changed the whole energy around him. One officer wrote, "Triggers unknown. Stay close but keep distance." Inmates were careful around him too, because they never wanted to be near him when that internal switch flipped. Calm Break wasn't dangerous because of action, but because of unpredictability rooted in emotion. He reminded officers of an uncomfortable truth. Some inmates struggle silently, and when emotion builds with no outlet, even calm people reach breaking points. The one who never lost focus. San Quentin is filled with distractions. Noise. Arguments. Announcements. Unexpected lockdowns. But one inmate never let anything pull him off track. His nickname? Laser. Laser had one goal. Self-improvement. Every day. Same schedule. Same workout. Same reading time. Same routines. Other inmates teased him, but they also respected his discipline. Laser wasn't feared for violence or influence. He was feared because he never lost focus. People who stay focused in prison become sharp. Mentally, emotionally, physically. Laser learned new skills. He studied discipline like a craft. And no matter what happened around him, noise, drama, confusion, he stayed locked in. Officers admired him. Inmates kept a respectful distance. Because someone that focused can outthink, outplan, and outlast almost anyone around them. Laser represents the type of inmate who becomes dangerous not by choice, but by self-control. The one who could read people like a book. Some inmates learn to read the prison. Some learn to read routines. But this man learned to read people. San Quentin staff gave him the file label. Behavior analyst, exceptional awareness. Inmates called him Psych. Not because he studied psychology, but because he understood people so well. It felt supernatural. He could tell when someone was nervous just by how they blinked. He could tell when someone was lying by how they shifted their weight. He could tell when tension was rising before anyone spoke. Once, during chow, he quietly stepped aside and said, "Move back 2 steps." His friend listened. 5 seconds later, 2 inmates bumped shoulders behind them. A small collision that instantly ignited a loud argument. Psych saw the entire situation coming before it even formed. Guards weren't afraid of him. They were careful around him. Because talking to someone who understands every emotion behind your words makes you feel exposed. Psych never used his gift to manipulate people. He didn't threaten. He didn't force influence. He simply saw people clearly, deeply, instantly. And that made him unsettling, because in prison, your emotions are usually the only thing you can hide. The one who refused to join anyone. Most inmates belong to something. A group, a community, a circle, a table in the chow hall. But this inmate refused all of it. His file nickname was Solo. Solo walked alone, ate alone, exercised alone, sat alone during yard time. Not because he pushed people away, but because he trusted no one. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He didn't make small talk. New inmates sometimes tried speaking to him, but the older inmates quickly whispered, "Leave him alone. He's been Solo for years." Officers noted that Solo stayed out of trouble. He didn't break rules. He didn't start arguments. He didn't seek conflict. But his deep isolation made him unpredictable. People who have no alliances also have nothing holding them back. One officer wrote, "No known supporters. No known enemies. Unusual neutrality." That neutrality made inmates nervous. If Solo didn't like you, there was no one to warn you. No one to mediate. No one to soften a disagreement. He lived in his own quiet world, a world that nobody could enter. And in a place built on connections and group dynamics, someone who stands completely alone becomes a mystery, and mysteries feel dangerous. The one who never spoke about his past. Every inmate has a story from the outside. Some share them openly, some brag, some exaggerate, but one inmate never said a single word about his past life. His nickname? Unknown. Unknown didn't talk about the streets, didn't talk about family, didn't talk about why he was in prison, didn't talk about anything before San Quentin. When others asked simple questions like, "Where you from?" he simply answered, "Here." That was it. No details. No history. Inmates tried to guess. Was he hiding something? Was he protecting someone? Was he running from a memory he didn't want to share? Officers tried to understand him too, but even they couldn't get much information from conversations. His silence about his past made people uneasy, because people fear what they can't understand. One officer wrote, "Extremely private. Zero background information from personal conversation." And in prison, when someone hides everything about who they were, it changes how people see who they are now. Unknown wasn't dangerous because of violence or power, but because of the deep mystery behind him. He was the one inmate in San Quentin whose story had no beginning, only the present. The one who planned everything down to the minute. Structure keeps some inmates sane. But this man took structure to a whole different level. His file name was the Planner. Every day, he created a mental schedule. Workout times, study times, meditation times, even when to clean his cell. He planned conversations. He planned when to walk to chow. He planned when to stand, when to sit, and when to sleep. Nothing was random. He lived by routine as if his mind were a clock. Officers admired his discipline, but they also kept an eye on him, because people who plan everything often think several steps ahead. And in a prison environment, a mind that stays 3 steps ahead can sometimes slip into dangerous territory. Not because he intended harm, but because he never stopped thinking. The Planner showed one of the rarest traits inside San Quentin: complete mental order, in a place built on chaos. And order, when pushed too far, can become unpredictable in its own way. The one who never stopped smiling. Most inmates have hardened expressions, tired eyes, serious faces. But one inmate always smiled. Every day, every moment, every situation. Inmates called him Smiles. But not because he was joyful. His smile never matched his eyes. Something about it felt wrong. Too steady, too constant, too calm. Guards said seeing Smiles walk the tier felt strange, like a storm wearing a friendly face. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't loud. He didn't start trouble. But when someone is always smiling, even during stressful moments, it confuses people around them. Inmates didn't know if Smiles was happy, angry, stressed, or planning something. They couldn't read him. They couldn't predict him. And unpredictability breeds caution. One officer said, "The smile never changed. That's what made it unsettling." Smiles didn't need strength or influence to be dangerous. He only needed that grin, permanent mask, that hid everything and revealed nothing. The one who never raised his voice, but everyone heard him. Some inmates shout to be respected. Some argue to be noticed. Some dominate conversations. But this inmate rarely spoke. And when he did, everyone stopped talking. His nickname? Low Tone. Low Tone didn't talk much, but his voice was deep, steady, and strangely commanding. He didn't ask for respect. People simply gave it to him. Not because he demanded authority, but because he carried a quiet confidence. If someone was causing unnecessary drama, Low Tone would say one sentence, just one, and the entire situation would deflate. He wasn't feared. He wasn't hated. He wasn't loud. He was respected. Because when he spoke with purpose. Officers described him as unusually influential through minimal speech. He was the opposite of chaos. He was the opposite of conflict. He was the anchor in a room full of storms. And in a place like San Quentin, a person who can calm a crowd simply by talking holds a kind of power few ever achieve. The walls remember everything. San Quentin is not just a prison. It's a world within a world, with its own rules, its own dangers, its own legends. Inside these walls stand men whose strength is not always in their fists, but in their silence, their patience, their intelligence, their influence, their unpredictability. Some are feared, some are respected, some are misunderstood. But all of them, every single one, shape the rhythm of this prison in ways most people will never see. From the shadow who moved without sound, to Iron Jaw with fire in his spirit, to the strategist, the old lion, Redline, and all the others. Each inmate carried a different kind of danger: mental, emotional, social, or physical. And that's the truth about San Quentin. Danger doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it thinks faster than the rest of the room. But most of all, danger here is shaped by survival. Years of it. Decades of it. A lifetime inside walls older than memory. San Quentin is a place where stories don't fade. They echo. They pass from cell to cell, from yard to tier, from one generation of inmates to the next. And even when inmates leave these walls behind, the prison remembers. Every footstep, every conversation, every choice made in the shadows. Because San Quentin is not defined by the walls. It's defined by the people who have walked inside them. The dangerous ones, the silent ones, the intelligent ones, the unpredictable ones, the misunderstood ones. This is the truth behind the untold files. Danger doesn't come from one person. It comes from the environment that shapes them all. And inside San Quentin, that environment never sleeps. It watches. It listens. It learns. It remembers. Thank you for watching today's deep dive into one of America's oldest and most legendary prisons. There are countless more stories behind these walls. And we've only opened a few files. If you want the next chapter, the next prison, the next untold story, you already know what to do.